Okay, Dr. Mohammed, glad we're having a really exciting session here. I was taken up by what you said about this whole thing about money being the push factor, but would you agree that it's not just money? It's just that people are in certain positions and you find that they can't go far because someone in their office has decided to interpret the NEP values or goals in a particular way.
Okay.
You know, but now you see, you find even the government's talking about meritocracy. So clearly things were mismanaged, and that's why people are leaving, not because of just money. Money, yes, because we all have to pay our bills.
I totally agree with you, but we have to remember the NEP policy doesn't really go on labor into the private sector. You look at the labor market, 100 jobs, 85 private sector, 5 GLC, 10 public sector. 85 brain drain not come from this 10% of public sector, come from 85 from the private sector. Who controls private sector? I think
there are wider issues. About perceived lack of education opportunities.
No, we're talking about the labor impediments, and there's a study done, funded by University Malaya, on hiring preferences. Even equal CVs, fresh graduate, everything else the same. There's one group would have preferences.
I have to correct you there, because the fact
is
we have also had the Industrial Coordination Act, and the Industrial Coordination Act was very clear on labor issues.
But it's not being implemented. It's not implemented now.
I like to make the point that it was taken away because of economic interest.
Exactly.
The reason why they took it away was because of the recession we had in the mid-1980s, and they recognized that this was impeding investments. And the minute they liberalized in manufacturing, and allowed for 100% ownership in that sector, it led to the 10-year boom that we saw in Malaysia between 1987 and 1997.
So the IC has been disbanded for 25 years.
Yes,
now, a long time.
But the brain drain, if you see it's NEP, because NEP you see from 1970 and stop 1990. But now you see it also among the Malays. If the bulk of the jobs is from the private sector, then you have to question what's happening in the private sector.
But how do you also explain the fact that the influx of foreign workers, expatriates, professionals, qualified people into Malaysia over the last, since 90s has been, I mean, they're living here. You know, in the 90s especially, every other person in Bangsa was a Masale engineer or accountants. I met Australian bricklayer.
But are they being paid Malaysian salaries? Or I know a lot of them are
opportunities are here. See, the opportunities are here, and all countries suffer brain drain. I read that Israel also suffers brain drain because they produce a lot of high-tech workers who go off to US especially. I think US is the biggest beneficiary. Even India suffers brain drain. So I don't think this is a good.
I think maybe not just job. We need to maybe go back to tertiary education.
Yeah, you may not be able to use this as a yardstick to measure this.
Because if you now you have a lot of private colleges, but that was something that only came about in the late 80s. You know, in the 90s with the twinning and everything. But before that, you could only go to a public university if you wanted that paper qualification. And if you could not get in to do what you want, and then if your parents had the means or you managed to scrounge around for a scholarship, you could go overseas. So the brain drain, I think, doesn't just start from the way you start working, the employment market, but from education as well. And I think some of the problems we find that, you know, I've read statistics that R&D in Malaysia is really pathetic, you know, for a country like Malaysia.
Agree with you, but it got nothing to do with the NEP policy. Same, isn't it?
And we've also had tremendous growth in the 80s, 90s. We had 8%, 9%. Despite all this, we had real growth in this country, and we had real social and physical development of of the society throughout all this period of brain drain and all these other problems which we think. The country still grew tremendously, and we're still growing, although it's lesser now.
I think we're getting sidetracked with this brain drain issue because there are a lot more other issues that
form
the problem.
But it's very important because most of the debate on issues always goes back NEP. I think we have to debate this calmly.
And I don't think it defines. I don't think it defines the weakness of the NEP.
No,
that's an important point.
I don't think so.
That's an important point because there's a defining moment. The defining moment was 1986, 1987, when we had a major economic recession. And even the government, Mahathir himself said, he's putting the NEP in abeyance.
Exactly.
He said that.
It's very flexible policy.
Soon after that, in 1990, there was significant liberalization that went on.
Yes.
And these were changes that, in recognition of the situation of the times, in addressing the problems, the government was responsive.
Yeah.
And they responded accordingly. And immediately we saw the consequence of that. As you pointed out, massive growth happened soon after that.
The fact that the government is responsive, as Professor Gomez says, it's like we always seem to respond to an economic crisis.
Yes.
You know, like that's the be-all and end-all. But I think there's so many other things about society's development that is important. You know, it's what kind of healthcare do you get? What kind of education? A whole lot of other things. But it always seems to be the bottom dollar. You know, it's like the import-export thing, our GDP, and then okay, let's put this policy at abeyance. Is it always going to be like that? Shouldn't we have a more holistic, shouldn't the government have a more holistic way of looking at how we develop policies and implement them?
I think the new economic model is a very good way to move forward.
You think
the new economic model, I think, has come up with various ideas, new ideas. It's a question of being able to implement that. I think up to today we have not really fully implemented in full the new economic model. There has to be...
Everyone's dying to jump in here.
I blogged about this just a couple of weeks back. If I may just make a one-liner, I think my view is that affirmative action, although it helps one group of people to bring up one group of society, it should not prevent, withhold, or obstruct other people from doing what they want to do. I think this has been the weakness or the problem in the NEP the last, how many years.
Yes, but I have to cut in here and say, but every time, let's say, the Prime Minister tries to do something or someone else, it's his own people or supporters who
That's the politics. That's the politics.
Yeah, but he has to deal with it.
Yeah.
And is he dealing with it? Or is he finding himself pushed into a corner so he has to back off?
Affirmative action should be fluid. Now, if you look at the socio-economic status, the bumi, especially the non-Malay bumi, is worse off. The focus now should be in Sabah and Sarawak, the orang asli. Same, the disabled, hiring discrimination for the disabled. We do nothing about them. We always talk on racial. There are a few dimensions of inequality that we should focus on. This, moving forward, this should be discussed, this should be given attention. On NEM, is that the correct move? I would say no. Like you said, we still dollar and cents. What we remember about NEM? $15,000 US targets.
Yes.
But does it mean everybody got 15,000? No, your paycheck is still your paycheck. My paycheck is still my paycheck. Thank you very much. We tend to forget the second prong, inclusiveness.
Yeah,
does it include everybody? Do we care about what happened in Sabah Sarawak? Do we care what happened in Gua Musang? From the way it seems, meritocracy, you penalizing those guys. What kind of society we want to be? What kind of economic policy we want to be, what kind of society we aspire to be, should be in NEM. But rather, we only focus on production, GDP, rather than well-being. That's the main weakness. We should not only focus on income, 15,000, but also asset. Now, a lot of people complain about housing. That's asset. Do we address? We are constrained, or rather have a fetish towards numbers.
Yes, we do. So we'll have to take another break here, and we'll come back.
All right.